Hello, I'm Scott Thompson, and welcome to After 10. President Park Geun-hye has been promoting the creative economy since the start of her administration. This year, the foundation was laid, but from next year, results will be expected. Something called creative finance will play a large role. Today on the show, we take a look at what that role is with the president of the Korea Capital Market Institute, Kim Hyung-tae. The World Bank Group opened a new office in Korea at the beginning of December. And the Asian Development Bank signed an MOU with Korea Capital Market Institute on November 28th. Along with the Park Geun-hye administration's creative economy drive, promoting financial policies has also been an emphasis. And Korea has actively passed on its experiences in capital markets to developing countries. On today's After 10, we talk about creative finance, which can offer similar opportunities to both Korea and developing nations. Meet Kim Hyung-tae, president of the Korea Capital Market Institute. President Kim, thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me here today.
Let's begin with an introduction to Korea Capital Market Institute. Tell us what the institute is and does, please.
Yes, Korea Capital Market Institute, KCMI, is a non-profit organization, the premier policy research think tank in Korea. As our name KCMI stands for, we concentrate on financial issues, financial industry, financial market, and capital market as well.
And on November 28th, one thing that KCMI did was to sign the first Korean Institute to sign a comprehensive MOU with Asian Development Bank. What does that MOU entail exactly?
Yes, as you may know, ADB, Asia Development Bank, is an international organization which exercises huge influence in this region, Asia Pacific. What they are doing is to help its member countries to develop its economies. However, we cannot, in developing the economies, we cannot think of economic advancement without thinking of mobilization of capital, without help of finance. So in this regard, what it means is that ADB, there are many areas and no limitations at all to what ADB and KCMI can work together to the benefit of each party. So that's the main reason why we partner with ADB. So as for the content, so this MOU was a comprehensive one. So we can think of two kinds of MOU. One is project-based MOU, which is more specific. If the project is completed, it's all gone. No more relationship between two institutions. This is more comprehensive, and that means it's a long-term commitment. And if we satisfy certain conditions, and to the benefit of each party, we can do everything we want as far as finance and capital market is concerned.
And this is significant. I don't want to overlook that fact. Tell us just how meaningful, just how significant this MOU is for Korea.
Korea is already far into matured economy, which shows low growth rate and low interest rate. It's very different from about dozens of years ago. So that's why we try to look for new economic driving force to make this economy keep moving. But in the domestic market, it's very hard to find the investment opportunities or economic growth opportunities. And the other important characteristic of Korean economy is that we are heavily reliant on the overseas market. I mean, Korea is export-driven economy. But the problem is we are too much dependent on exporting goods instead of exporting services or capital investment. So from the perspective of stability or diversification perspective, so we need to diversify the main source of our current account surplus. Because Korea is export-driven economy, maintaining current account surplus is very important, but we are too much dependent on exporting goods. So one way to address this problem is go outside, go overseas market, and investment the securities and companies and portfolio investment by our financial services industries. Because we made a comprehensive MOU with ADB, so probably we'll do a pivotal role in concerting other countries in the financial system architecture, financial services market, or making industry best practice.
You mentioned China there. Was there talk in the MOU about
Yes,
cooperation with China and Japan as well?
Yes, because if we take a look at the geographics, Korea, China, and Japan are all neighbors. And we have similar historic and cultural background. And then when it comes to the economy, looking at the real sectors, we are very much closely related. For example, China is our biggest trading partner in terms of export and import. And we import more from Japan than we export to Japan. So we are closely interconnected. But if we take a look at the financial sector, financial community, the situation is quite the opposite. Each country is like an island. So we have barely witnessed any close relationship in the financial field. Of course, in the real sector side, we have FTA and TPP. Any bilateral or multilateral framework, we can work together under that framework. But in the financial side, we don't have that framework.
Why is that?
I don't know. Finance is more related to countries' sovereignty or systemic risk. So each country is more conservative, more protective. They maintain protected position as far as financial industry or capital market is concerned. So one of the main area which is included in this MOU is that we will try our best to give the research ideas to ADB and other countries to strengthen the trilateral collaboration between Korea, China, and Japan.
Let's shift gears to the creative economy, definitely one of the hot topics of 2013. Yes. When you look at the drive by the Park Geun-hye administration for a creative economy, what do you see?
President Park Geun-hye proposed creative economy as a growth engine for the future, for the next generation. I think what makes creative economy very unique and different from the traditional and past economic growth model is that it is solely based on ideas, intangible, invisible ideas. And the implementation way is to combine various industries with IT industries. Why IT industries? Because this is an area where Korea has global comparative edge over. So this is idea-based economic growth model, and it's more like combination and integration of various kind of industry, and it's a totally different one from the past.
And it sounds like from what you're saying, you're in favor of this idea. You like this idea of going this direction.
Yes, I like this idea. Yeah, this is because in the 70s, 80s, typical economic growth model is financing the money and inject the capital to the hardware facilities or factories. But that kind of economic growth model was best suited to Korea in 80s until 90s. But this time is totally different. We face with totally different global environment. We now to change the economic growth model. So that does not necessarily mean that traditional economic model based on large corporation and export is not important. What I'm saying is that it's the right time to complement the traditional model with new one that's probably creative economy will play that function in the future.
And we are talking about a paradigm shift here. You talked about the global environment. When you look at the Korean environment for creative businesses right now, from a starting point, what do you see?
At this time, the most important thing is that to look over which country in the world is most creative, in the sense that that economy consistently produce, generate innovative, creative companies. Scott, which country do you think it is? Probably.
I mean, most people would guess the U.S.
Yes,
right?
U.S. it is, I think. So why U.S. is so much successful in creating consistently that kind of creative companies? So U.S. is, I think, a very good benchmark, a reference for us. Of course, we need to come up with our own economic and social architecture best suited for us, but U.S. is a very good reference for us. If we take a look at the U.S. case, we can think of several reasons why U.S. is so successful and effective in creating that innovative companies. The key word is patience, I think. The first factor is patient education. What I mean by patient education is no matter how stupid question the student raise, and even the provocative, I think the U.S. teachers will accept it, invigorate, encourage their questions. And second one is very impatient antitrust law in the U.S. For example, about 80s and 90s, in the IT industry, IBM was the most powerful one. Without help of this antitrust law, Microsoft today cannot appear, cannot begin their business at all. Now, the situation is totally different. Now Microsoft is a target for antitrust law, but they accept it because they know that without this act, they could not have a chance to grow up and advance at this stage. This is very important policy philosophy which boosts up startups, innovates companies. They make their dreams come true. And third one is the patient capital. What I mean by patient here is that the capital provider must be risk-absorbing capacity. Who has the largest risk-absorbing capacity is the government itself, government fiscal budget. But after the subprime crisis in U.S., European crisis, regardless of countries, advanced or emerging, every government is so sensitive to maintain their safe and sound fiscal conditions. So it's almost impossible for any government to inject the capital, their fiscal capital, as they want, to the companies they want to raise. So that means we need something else. That's what we expect from the capital market. That's exactly the function we expect capital market to serve in the economy. Compared with the U.S. economy, we need to learn from the U.S. But what is, I think it's a strong point from the part of Korea is that, Korea has very highly qualified human resources. Now, if you take a look at the college entrance rate, it's more than 80%. That means more than almost 83% of high school graduate enter into college. It's way above highest in the world. So how to make advantage of it, how to capitalize on this high qualified human resource, I think that's a very important point we need to pay attention to in fostering creative economy in Korea.
In July, the government unveiled its Creative Economy Action Plan and announced it would raise a total of 2.6 trillion won in funding, including 500 billion won for a future creation fund, 100 billion won for a youth startup fund, and 2 trillion won for a growth ladder fund. The government also opened Konex, the Korea New Exchange, in June, a new stock market for venture and startup businesses as part of efforts to promote the creative economy.
You've said before that Korea should have about 5 to 6 investment banks in order to
Yes.
develop its financial investment industry and to also solidify its status in Asia. Well, why such an emphasis on investment banks?
It's a good question. And let me first make clear the definition of investment bank. Investment bank is financial institutions in the capital market which trade and underwrite, absorb, and transform the risk. They are risk absorber. That matches very well in the creative economy I mentioned before. So if we take a look at the global and regional economy, government alone cannot provide the capital, cannot take sufficient risk, which is required to maintain or boost up the Korean economy. So we need something else. That's capital market, and IB is the main financial intermediary in the capital market. So that's the reason why I emphasize the economic role of investment bank in the future. And the other point is that if we take a look at the future, domestic market is too small, especially from the part of Korea. We are small and open economy, heavily reliant on overseas market. We must go outside. That's what Samsung, Hyundai, and LG have done in the past. That's what financial service industry have not done and could not do in the past. So in 5 years later, or 10 years later, I think I'm convinced the regional market will be more harmonized and more integrated. So it will be a great chance for Korean and other domestic financial institutions to extend their business to overseas market. At that time, we must compete not with domestic financial institutions. We must compete with Chinese or Japanese investment bank. But to increase the visibility and take the risk in the regional market, I think size, what I mean by size here in investment banking business is capital, not just assets. So certain amount of sufficient capital is not everything in the IB business, but something very important.
LG, Samsung, Hyundai, these are all Korean companies that have gained a foothold in the international market.
They did.
But the financial companies have not been able to reach that kind of success. The question is why?
So many people ask, that's the most frequently asked question if I participate in a conference as a speaker panelist in the other countries. They respect Samsung very much. Okay? They compete with Apple. They are a strong company. But we can think of several reasons. First reason is that it's very unique in Korea, but Korea's financial industry and finance companies has played the role like the first daughter in the very poor family. Probably you do not understand this because you have grown up in the U.S. In Korea, traditionally, especially in poor country, the first daughter have to take care of their own families. They support their parents and support the education of their brothers and younger sisters. So that's what the Korea's financial services did in the past to support the larger corporations. For example, Samsung, Hyundai. And so Korea's finance service industry, not now, but 80s, until 80s and 70s, has not been regarded as the independent industry. The second reason is that Korea, unlike Samsung, LG, and other goods exporting companies, they solely focus on domestic market. They do not take into account international, global, or regional market in the first place. So that's the second reason. And third reason is that the regulation. Financial services industry is a typical regulated industry. We cannot emphasize too much on the importance of regulation when it comes to financial industry. But after the subprime crisis, US and UK, other advanced countries, they impose more strict regulations on the financial industry. But in Korea's case, Korea's financial industry, for example, investment banking industry have no chance to exercise the power to extend their business or like risky business. So our situation is very different from that of US and UK. So we need to come up with a regulation scheme, infrastructure, which is best suited to Korea. And the last one is that we need to change the concept of financial institutions. If we take a look at the league table, global league table of financial institutions, in case of commercial banks and invest banks and even insurance companies, there we barely see the change in top 10 companies. Just one or two companies changed in the league table. But one area of financial sector which we have seen the significant change in the league table is a private equity fund and hedge fund area. That means that this private fund area is because considering the properties of this business model of private fund, it's very hard for incumbent established financial institutions maintain their power and market share, because so many creative ideas are coming up from this market, from hedge fund, private equity fund. So if Korea want to make one financial institution to get into the global top 10, I think probably private equity fund, hedge fund is a very promising one, rather than commercial bank or investment bank or insurance companies.
Many people are expecting tangible achievements with regard to the creative economy in 2014. What are your expectations in the upcoming year?
Yes, this year, 2013, we made many policy measures and many revised acts to provide foundations for creative economy in the future. From 2014, probably we'll see some tangible performance, tangible result. But it probably will begin with deal sourcing. For example, if the government provide a capital to, for example, private equities, venture capitals, or growth ladder fund, then that fund will look for the target companies, which is appropriate for their fund target. So I think what we can see in next year, 2004, is that this deal sourcing project. So if you mean the tangible result as, for example, the rate of return on profitability, then we must wait several more years. Probably rate of return or other financial performance we can expect from probably 2015.
These things take time.
Yeah, it takes time. 2014, probably in reality, in business practice, more and more capital is injected, allocated to the creative industries and creative companies. That's what we expect to see in next year.
Dr. Kim, we'll all be looking forward to the next year and all that it has to offer. We thank you very much for being on the show and sharing your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time, After 10.